Hello, I'm Jared Altick, and I'm here with Kevin Hardy. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have you here. And Kevin Hardy is a first responder chaplain and also a trainer of chaplains. In fact, one of the first chaplain training programs I ever went to was with Kevin, and he was my instructor, and I very much appreciated what I learned from him. And I brought him in today because I wanted to talk about chaplains programs and specifically ask him what his best argument is for the existence of a chaplain's program in a police department, fire department, first responder setting.
Sure.
What's your best argument for why such a thing should exist?
Because it's needed.
Okay.
I know that sounds kind of, Pat, right? Yeah, great answer, kid. But it is. The one thing I look at most frequently is the fact that as humans, we're triune beings. So we've got a body, and then we've got our soul, which is our mind, our will, our emotions.
Okay.
And then we're a spirit being as well. We've got that eternal part of us that just goes on.
It's going to last.
It's going to last. Yeah. And so as triune beings, each part needs taken care of. And most of your first response departments are going to have a peer support team or a psychologist or psychiatrist on board, and they can help the physical aspect, they can help the mental aspect, but chaplains are really, really needed to deal with the spiritual side of things. And I think that's probably the most important aspect of having a chaplain program is you take care of the whole person. That's such a big push right now, wellness and all that with all the departments. And in order to really take care of the whole being, you've got to add that spiritual piece.
Right, and that push for wellness has been around for years, for decades. But I mean, I've seen officer wellness things going back to the 70s.
Right.
But yet we're not exactly winning that battle everywhere with fire departments and police departments. I mean, there's a lot of bad statistics out there.
Absolutely. When suicide rates outnumber line of duty deaths, there's issues that aren't being taken care of.
Yeah.
And as chaplains, we have the opportunity to be a part of the department and yet separate enough that once we can gain the trust of the officer or the firefighter or the paramedic, once we can get behind the badge, then we can start to help address those issues. And so to me, it's so important that if we want to take care of the whole individual, we got to address that spiritual side, because as great as the wellness programs are and the help that they do, if you're not catching that first piece, in my opinion, the spiritual piece, then you're missing out on a lot of care that can be given.
Right. And the outsider component, I think, is important also. That's something that I promote when I talk to police officers. I go in the police department to roll calls, and every year, usually in January, February, I'll go to every single roll call and explain what is a chaplain. So what the heck is a chaplain? And that conversation, I almost always mention, well, I'm outside of your chain of command. And so I don't affect discipline. I don't affect promotions. If you need to gripe about your sergeant or whatever, or if your sergeant needs to gripe about you, they can come to the chaplain, and I'm under layers of confidentiality, and there's just an outsider element there where I'm familiar, but I'm not part of the system. And I think that helps also.
It does, but it for those that are listening, it takes 18 months on an average, I've found, to build enough trust with an officer, particularly officers, because they're skeptical because of the job they do. And they have to be. And so it takes longer to get behind that badge. But on an average, 18 months to even get to the point where they'll start talking about family and start talking about the pressures of the job, start talking about the politics in the office. And I am really honked off at command staff right now, and I got passed over for this. All those those things come out, and when you know them and they trust you and you have that relationship, when you do the ride along, that's their office and there's no other ears around, and that's when they open up, and that's when they're really themselves. And so crucial to have a chaplain program.
Absolutely. What other kinds of issues, what kind of problems and factors go into these officers and firefighters and first responders needing someone like a chaplain?
Well, if you think just to what they do on a day-to-day basis, Every time they report for work, they're going to see trauma.
Yeah.
They're going to see death. They're going to see the worst in people. They're going to see.
They kind of have their nose rubbed in it, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
It's just the worst of society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's day after day after day.
Yeah.
And when you gear up for work, you go in expecting the worst because you have to. You have to be on that level of readiness to be able to function through that shift.
Yeah.
I was a paramedic for 20 years. And so I know what it's like to report for work, get out on the streets, and you run call after call after call, and you never get back to the station. And it's full cardiac arrest. It's an MVA with a fatality. It's a structure fire with a fatality. And you see those things and you deal with those things day after day, and that stuff builds up.
Yeah.
And that's traumatic stress, and it builds up in you, and eventually it gets cumulative, and it can affect you, take you off the job if you're not careful.
Okay. And of course, we also have the way society is today. We have an attitude toward our first responders, especially police departments.
Absolutely.
Where there's a pretty strong feeling against that, and that affects the officers.
Sure. When you report for work and you know you're hated for the uniform you wear and for the job you do, and that's the only reason you're hated. They don't know you. Nobody knows you. But you're still hated because of the job you do. That weighs really heavy. We all deal with rejection, but when it's part of your job day after day after day and getting put down and getting called everything in the book, and those negatives just beat on your spirit. They beat on your mind. They just they weigh you down, and they wear you down. And so we can come in as chaplains with that hope and that encouragement that, hey, man, we love what you're doing. We appreciate you. And we can build them up and encourage them and just offer them hope and life and just tell them, hey, man, we love what you do. We love you guys and we love what you're doing. And they don't hear that often enough. And so chaplains get an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So tell me, what are some of the arguments for a chaplaincy program? Some of the roles, some of the things that chaplains do that really help.
Well, first and foremost is because we see it as we do ride-alongs and that type of thing. A lot of times we're a bridge between the officer or firefighter, EMT. We're a bridge between them and the community.
Yeah.
And there are times I've been on scene as a chaplain where, the fire department is there and they call the code and they just walk, they're gone.
Yeah.
And they're like, why didn't they do more? How come they couldn't do this? And you get to explain what's going on, or why is that firefighter cutting a hole in my roof? Well, they're ventilating the roof so they can, get the gases out and help with the firefight. So you're there as a bridge. You can really encourage the community and let them know what these officers are doing. And it also allows you to focus on the family or the bystanders or whoever, and it allows the police officers, firefighters, etc., to do their job.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with the community. So that's a big one.
I've always said that if we're in a situation like a homicide and there's a large crowd of people gathered at the yellow tape, and it's not that our officers aren't able to deal with that to a degree, but sometimes they have competing responsibilities. And so that might be a situation where you take a chaplain, by the belt buckle and throw him over the yellow tape. and we as chaplains are civilians. We're volunteers usually. And we can sometimes do a little bit of that translating from cop to civilian or from first responder. That battalion chief, may not say things in a way that makes sense to the person standing there looking at their house, and so we can kind of translate and kind of help a little bit, be that bridge you were talking about.
Right, absolutely.
What are some of the others that you have?
I think being able to offer hope on absolutely the worst day of someone's life, whether that's an officer or a fire personnel or community. Mm-hmm. We have a great opportunity to go into any given situation and offer hope and offer encouragement and provide solutions. We see it as chaplains when we respond on a death notification where the family's just at a loss because this was unexpected, and we have the opportunity to bring hope that there's a reason to go ahead and move forward. Let's kind of get through this initial shock together. Let's get your support system engaged and moving. Get your pastor involved. Get your family involved, or whoever, your trusted neighbor, friend, and let's start thinking ahead a little bit, because here's what's going to happen. Medical examiner is going to come in. They're going to do their thing, and then the body will either be released to the funeral home or they'll take it to the medical examiner's office. But you got to be thinking about, where do you want the body to go? Belongings. What about medications? What about Social Security? All those things come into play. And we get the opportunity to minister to those folks just by helping them through that initial season, that initial time. And it's just a real blessing to be able to do that.
Well, and I feel like, too, that a lot of times I've had the opportunity to, as a chaplain, to be a voice of hopefulness and optimism and just what we in Christianity would call hope, as far as, a certainty about where we're going to be in the future. I've had opportunity to give a voice to that. It's not that the different firefighters or police officers didn't believe that, but their job kind of breeds cynicism as a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes it's kind of, if they're in job mode, if they've got their hat on and they're thinking along those lines, a lot of times it'll be a very cynical, pessimistic, kind of jaded kind of tone that comes across.
Sure.
And some officers do a great job of balancing that out and not letting that come across to the civilian that they're speaking to. But I think a chaplain can come in and be deliberately hopeful, and that's helpful that we have that much hope. And I think that just helps everybody. I think that helps. The police officer needs to hear something positive. The person in the crisis needs to hear something positive. And I feel like chaplains can provide that.
Right. And afterwards, once we've cleared the scene, we go back to the station, or we see that officer again. Hey, how are you doing? You holding up okay? I've been on many a scene where it was a firefighter's first fatal fire, or a young police officer's first fatal MVA. And you got to go back to them, because how are they going to process that? They've never had to process anything like that. And as chaplains, we get that opportunity to check on them and make sure they're doing okay.
Yeah, being shot at for the first time or something. Absolutely. Okay. What's your next one?
I would say probably the fact that we, as outsiders, if you will, as volunteers, and as chaplains, we have the opportunity to provide confidential, privileged communication. As pastors, most chaplains are licensed ministers or chaplains, or as pastors. And so with that, we can offer that confidential conversation that you can let me everything, tell me everything you want to tell me about your sergeant or about your lieutenant or, even the chief. You can go there if you want. I'll listen and I'll know, and nobody's going to know what you told me, because that's what we can do. Now I'm on the Missouri side of things, and we have obviously certain things we have to report.
Sure.
But that's made part of the conversation. Hey, if we're going to talk about these things, we gotta talk to somebody else as well. But that privileged, confidential communication, they know they can call you and go, I got to talk. And it's tremendous. It's a tremendous.
Yeah, and anybody starting out as a chaplain needs to understand that will not happen right off. I had people approach me early on, but they never followed through. Right. The only ones who ever really opened up were ones that I'd been around for some length of time.
It takes years. This is where we get into the fun word. It's a ministry of presence. Yeah. And what does that mean? It means being there in the mundane. It means being there at roll call. It means being there, just stopping by the station and checking in on folks. It means doing ride-alongs when we're allowed to do ride-alongs. It means that when you get pulled over for speeding and they walk up to the car, they go, Chaplain. They know your face. Right. They know your face, and they know who you are. And that's important, because one, they've seen you around, you've been there through the good, you've been there through the bad, and you've kept your word. We have to be integrous in all that we do. When we say we're going to show up, we've got to show up. When we say we're going to do a ride-along, we got to come in and do that ride-along. Because if we don't, then they're not going to trust us, because you can't even keep your word. Yeah. So that's important. But that ministry of presence is probably the most important thing we do as chaplains. Yeah. So being there and being known, just like they can look at you and go, that's the chaplain. They know who we are. They may never interact with us.
No. But yeah, I think you should assume that they're going to see you dozens of times before they'll start to open up to you.
Yeah.
At least in a meaningful way. There are some personalities that just they liked their pastor growing up, and so they see this chaplain and they warm up to you, at least in a casual kind of way. But as far as like helping them, you're going to see them a lot before they actually give you the opportunity to come in. Yes. And go behind the badge, like you were saying.
And I'm on one department right now that I've been there for over 12 years, and I've still got 2 or 3 that absolutely want nothing to do with any of the chaplains.
Yeah.
You're not going to ride with me.
Yep.
I don't want to talk to you. And it's interesting, but when crisis hits, we get a phone call, and we help them through that crisis, and then it's right back to don't talk to me,
right.
And that's all right. That's
okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity to share a testimony and a witness, and that's important.
That's awesome, Kevin. Thank you for that. And tell me, where can we get more information about what you do?
Sure. The best place to get in contact with me is at mwcn.online. That's mwcn.online. That's the Midwest Chaplain Network website. And there are obviously various pages and various things for first responders as well as chaplains. Feel free to get on there, look around, and kind of keep an eye on those things we're doing. And we'd love to see you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you later.